Have you ever watched a movie in English, understood almost every word on the page when you read the script later, but in the moment, while the actors were actually talking, you felt completely lost? Have you ever listened to a native speaker say something simple, something you absolutely know, and your brain just froze for half a second, and by the time you caught up, the conversation had already moved 3 sentences ahead? If you're nodding right now, even if nobody can see you nodding, then this episode was made for you. Welcome back to English in Fluency. And today, we are going to talk about one of the most frustrating, most misunderstood, and most trainable skills in the entire process of learning English: your listening ear. Before we dive in, let me say a quick hello to everyone joining us for the first time. This is English in Fluency, the podcast where we don't just talk about English, we practice it together, sentence by sentence, sound by sound, until it starts to feel natural in your mouth and in your ears. If you're at a B1 level right now, congratulations. That's actually a huge milestone. You're not a beginner anymore. You can hold a conversation. You can read a news article and get the general idea. You can write an email without panicking. But B1 is also this strange middle zone, isn't it? It's the zone where you know enough grammar to be dangerous, but your ears haven't quite caught up to your brain. And that gap, that space between what you understand on paper and what you understand in real, fast, connected speech, that gap is exactly what we're closing today. So here's what we're going to do in this episode. First, I'm going to explain why listening feels so much harder than reading or even speaking. And it's not because you're bad at English, it's because of how spoken English actually works, which is very different from the clean, tidy English you find in textbooks. Then we're going to break down the specific sound patterns that trip up B1 learners again and again. Things like linking, reduction, and the way native speakers just swallow certain words. After that, I'm going to walk you through a set of training techniques you can start using today. Techniques like shadowing, active prediction, and chunk listening. And finally, we're going to do a real guided listening practice together, right here, in this episode, where I'll say phrases at natural speed, then slow them down, then invite you to repeat them back. So grab your headphones if you have them. Find a quiet corner. Maybe close your eyes if you're not driving. And let's get your ears working the way they're supposed to. Let's start with a question that I think almost every English learner has asked themselves at some point. Why is listening so much harder than everything else? You study grammar rules, you memorize vocabulary lists, you can write a fairly complex sentence if you take your time. But the moment someone starts speaking to you at a normal pace, all of that knowledge seems to disappear. It feels unfair, doesn't it? Like your brain has all the pieces, but it can't put them together fast enough. Here's the truth, and I want you to really sit with this for a moment. Listening is not a passive skill. A lot of learners treat listening like it's the easy part, like you just sit there and let the words wash over you and somehow understanding happens automatically. But that's not how it works at all. Listening is an incredibly active, incredibly fast process where your brain has to do about 5 or 6 things at the exact same time. It has to recognize individual sounds. It has to group those sounds into words. It has to recognize those words even when they don't sound like the clean version you learned in class. It has to hold those words in short-term memory, while more words keep coming. It has to build grammar and meaning out of that stream in real time. And it has to do all of this while the speaker keeps talking, without pausing, without waiting for you to catch up. Reading gives you time. You can go back. You can slow down. You can look up a word. Listening gives you no such mercy. The audio just keeps moving forward, like a river, whether you're ready or not. Now here's the second piece of the puzzle, and this is the part that I think really surprises people. The English you hear in real conversations, in movies, in podcasts like this one, is not the same English you learned from your textbook. Textbook English is often recorded slowly, clearly, with every single word pronounced fully and separately. That's useful in the beginning. It gives you a foundation, but it creates a kind of false expectation. It teaches your ear to expect a version of English that native speakers almost never actually use in real life. Real spoken English is full of shortcuts. Words blend into each other, sounds disappear, unstressed words practically vanish. A sentence like, "What are you going to do?" often becomes something that sounds more like, "What you gonna do?" And if your ear has only ever been trained on the slow, clear version, that fast, blended version sounds like a completely different language. So when you struggle to understand spoken English, it's usually not because your vocabulary is too small or your grammar is too weak. Often, you actually know the words. If you saw them written down, you would understand them instantly. The problem is that your ear has never been trained to recognize those same words in their fast, connected, real-life form. And the good news, the genuinely good news, is that this is completely fixable. Listening comprehension is not a fixed talent that some people have and others don't. It is a trainable skill, exactly like a muscle. You can build it up systematically, through the right kind of practice. And that's what the rest of this episode is going to help you do. Let's get into the actual mechanics now. Because I think once you understand what's happening beneath the surface of spoken English, listening stops feeling like magic and starts feeling like a system you can learn. The first hidden rule is something called linking. In spoken English, we don't pronounce words as separate little islands with silence between them. Instead, the end of one word connects directly to the beginning of the next word, especially when the first word ends in a consonant sound and the next word starts with a vowel sound. Think about the phrase, "turn it off." If you said each word completely separately, it would sound like turn, it, off, very robotic, very unnatural. But a native speaker links those words together. So it comes out sounding more like turn it off, almost like one long word with the sounds flowing into each other. Let's try another one. The phrase, an apple, doesn't sound like an apple with a gap in the middle. It sounds like an apple, with the N from an sliding right into the A of apple. This linking happens constantly, in almost every sentence you'll ever hear. And it's one of the biggest reasons spoken English sounds so fast and blurry to a learner's ear. Once you know to listen for it, though, you start hearing the pattern everywhere, and it stops being confusing and starts being predictable. Let's practice that phrase together. I'll say it at a natural pace. Turn it off. Now say it with me. Repeat. Turn it off. The second hidden rule is reduction. This is when certain sounds, especially unstressed vowels, get shortened or weakened almost to the point of disappearing. The best example of this is the word to in casual speech. When to is unstressed, which is most of the time, it often reduces to something that sounds more like tuh. So, I want to go doesn't sound like I want to go with a clear, full to. It sounds more like I want to go with want and to blending together into wanna, and the vowel getting very short and weak. This isn't lazy speech, and it isn't slang, even though it might look that way when it's written down. This is simply how native speakers naturally pronounce English at a normal conversational speed. Let's hear it slowly first. I want to go. Now, let's hear it at natural speed. I want to go. Try saying it yourself now. Repeat. I want to go. Here's another very common reduction. The word for. In a sentence like, this is for you, when for is unstressed, it often shortens to something like fur, so the whole phrase comes out sounding closer to, this is for you. Let's slow it down first. This is for you. And now at natural speed. This is for you. Your turn. Repeat. This is for you. The third hidden rule, and this one trips up almost every B1 learner I have ever worked with, is auxiliary verb reduction, especially with words like have, has, will, and would. In fast speech, have, after a pronoun, often reduces down to something that sounds almost like the letter V. So, I have been there can sound like I've been there. And in even faster speech, that I've get so light, it's almost just a quick UV sound attached to the I. Similarly, would often reduces to something that sounds like D, so I would like becomes I'd like, and what would you like becomes something closer to what do you like? Let's break that last one down slowly. What would you like? Now at natural conversational speed. What do you like? Try it. Repeat. What do you like? The fourth hidden rule is something linguists call assimilation, which is when one sound changes slightly because of the sound right next to it. So the two sounds blend into something a little different from either original sound. A classic example is the phrase, did you? Say it slowly, and you get did you? Two very separate words. But in fast natural speech, the D sound and the Y sound blend together into a sound similar to J. So, did you often comes out as didja. Let's hear it slowly. Did you eat yet? Now, at natural speed. Didja eat yet? Your turn now. Repeat. Didja eat yet? Here's another assimilation example that shows up constantly in everyday conversation. The phrase, don't you, slowly. That's don't, you. But blended together in fast speech, it often becomes don'tcha, with the T and Y sounds merging into a soft che sound. Let's slow it down. Don't you think so? Now at natural speed. Don't you think so? Give it a try. Repeat. Don't you think so? The fifth hidden rule is elision, which is really just a fancy word for sounds disappearing completely. Sometimes an entire sound, or even a small word, just gets dropped in fast speech because it isn't necessary for understanding, and speakers naturally cut it to save time and effort. A great example is the word probably in careful, slow speech. you'd hear all three syllables, probably. But in fast natural speech, that middle syllable often disappears almost entirely. So it comes out sounding more like probably, with just two syllables. Let's hear both versions. Slowly. Probably. Naturally. Probably. Try saying the natural version. Repeat. Probably. Another very common elision happens with the word because. In fast casual speech, this often shortens down to just cuz, dropping almost the entire first part of the word. Let's compare. Slowly. Because I said so. Naturally. 'Cause I said so. Your turn to practice. Repeat. 'Cause I said so. There's actually a sixth pattern worth mentioning, too, called intrusion, which is almost the opposite of elision, since it involves an extra sound sneaking in between two words rather than a sound disappearing. This often happens between two vowel sounds, where speakers naturally insert a small W or Y sound to make the transition smoother and easier to say. Think about the phrase, go on, said carefully. That's go, on, two separate vowel endings bumping into each other. But, in natural speech, a light W sound often slips in between them. So it comes out sounding closer to go on. Let's hear it slowly first. Go on, tell me. And now at natural speed. Go on, tell me. Try it yourself. Repeat. Go on. Tell me. Now, here's something really important that I want you to understand about all 5 of these patterns: linking, reduction, assimilation, and elision. These are not mistakes. These are not signs of bad or careless English. Every single native speaker does this, all the time, in every kind of English, whether it's American, British, Australian, or any other variety. This is simply how human speech naturally works when people talk quickly and comfortably with each other. And here's the encouraging part. You don't actually need to produce all of these reductions perfectly yourself when you speak. You can speak more slowly and clearly than a native speaker, and still sound completely natural and be totally understood. But you absolutely do need to be able to recognize these patterns when you hear them. Because if your ear only knows the slow, textbook version of English, then real conversations, movies, and podcasts are going to sound like a blur of unfamiliar sounds, even though you actually know every single word being used. Let's talk for a moment about what's actually happening inside your brain when you listen to English and start to feel lost. Because understanding this process is going to make the training techniques in the next section make a lot more sense. When you hear a stream of connected speech, your brain is trying to do something called segmentation, which means breaking that continuous flow of sound into individual words. In your native language, you do this instantly and automatically, without any conscious effort at all, because you've had a lifetime of practice recognizing exactly where one word ends and the next one begins, even when they're blended together. But in a second language, especially at the B1 level, this segmentation process isn't automatic yet. Your brain has to work much harder to find the boundaries between words. And while it's doing that hard work, it's also trying to remember what it just heard, translate or process the meaning, predict what might come next, and prepare to keep listening to whatever comes after that. That's an enormous amount of mental work happening in just a second or two, and it's exhausting. which is exactly why listening in a foreign language can leave you feeling tired in a way that reading rarely does. Here's an important truth that I really want you to hold on to, especially if you've ever felt frustrated or even a little embarrassed about your listening skills. The feeling of being lost while listening is not a sign that you're bad at English. It's a completely normal sign that your brain's automatic word segmentation system for English is still under construction. And the wonderful thing about that system is that it genuinely can be built, strengthened, and made faster through the exact same process your brain used when you were a child learning your first language, which is repeated, focused exposure to real, natural sound patterns. This is precisely why passive listening, just having English playing in the background while you do other things, doesn't actually improve your comprehension very much. Your brain needs focused, active attention on the sound patterns themselves in order to build new neural pathways for recognizing them. And that brings us perfectly into our next section, the actual training techniques. All right. Now that you understand why listening is hard and what's actually happening inside spoken English, let's talk about how to fix it. I'm going to walk you through 5 techniques that I consider absolutely essential for any B1 learner who wants to train their ear. These aren't random tips I found somewhere. These are methods used by language teachers, interpreters, and even actors learning accents, because they work with how the brain actually learns sound patterns. The first technique is called shadowing, and if you've never heard of it before, get ready, because this might become your favorite listening exercise. Shadowing means listening to a short piece of audio and speaking along with it at the exact same time, trying to match the speaker's rhythm, their speed, their pausing, and their intonation as closely as you possibly can. You're not translating. You're not even necessarily thinking about the meaning of every word in that moment. You're focused entirely on becoming a shadow of the speaker's voice. Here's why this works so well for training your ear specifically, even though it looks like a speaking exercise on the surface. When you try to physically produce the same rhythm and sounds you're hearing, your brain is forced to notice details it would normally skip right past. Things like where the stress falls in a sentence, which words get reduced, and exactly how fast the linking happens between words. You genuinely cannot shadow a sentence well without noticing its sound pattern first. So shadowing trains your listening and your speaking at the exact same time. Let's practice this together right now with a short phrase. I'm going to say it once at normal speed. Then I want you to try shadowing me on the second time, speaking right along with me, matching my rhythm as closely as you can. Here's the phrase. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Listen first. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Now let's do it together. Shadow me. Repeat. I don't know what I'm gonna do. The second technique is active prediction, and this one is less about physical practice and more about training a mental habit. Before you press play on any piece of listening material, whether it's a podcast episode, a video, or even a conversation you're about to have, take a few seconds to predict what you might hear. What's the topic? What kind of words or phrases are likely to come up? If you're about to watch a video about ordering food at a restaurant, you can predict you'll probably hear phrases like, "Can I get?" or I'll have, or what would you recommend? This prediction step does something really powerful for your brain. It activates the relevant vocabulary and phrases in your memory before you even start listening. So when those words actually do appear in the fast, blended, natural speech, your brain recognizes them much faster because it was already primed to expect them. It's the difference between searching for a friend's face in a crowd when you already know what they're wearing, versus searching for someone when you have no idea what to look for. Prediction gives your brain a target to search for. The third technique is chunk listening, and this is one of the most important shifts in mindset that a B1 learner can make. Instead of trying to understand a sentence word by word, like translating one word, then the next word, then the next word, train yourself to listen for chunks, which are natural groups of words that go together as a single unit of meaning. Phrases like, I don't know, or as soon as possible, or it depends on, or let me think about it, function almost like single words in the mind of a fluent speaker. They're said quickly, as one connected unit, and a trained ear recognizes the whole chunk instantly, rather than needing to process each individual word separately. When you listen word by word, you're always one step behind the speaker, because by the time you've processed word one, the speaker is already 3 words ahead. But when your ear learns to recognize common chunks as single units, your processing speed increases dramatically. Because you're recognizing bigger pieces of language at once instead of tiny individual pieces. Let's practice hearing a few of these chunks. I'll say each one at natural speed, and I want you to just notice how it flows as one single sound unit, rather than several separate words. Here's the first one. As soon as possible. Repeat. As soon as possible. Here's another. It depends on the weather. Repeat. It depends on the weather. And one more. I'm not really sure about that. Repeat. I'm not really sure about that. The fourth technique is what I like to call the 3-pass method, and it's specifically designed for working with any piece of listening material. Whether that's this podcast, a YouTube video, a song, or a scene from a show. On your first pass, listen to the whole clip without stopping, without pausing, and without worrying at all about understanding every single word. Your only goal on this first listen is to catch the general topic and overall mood. Are they happy? Frustrated? Explaining something? Arguing? This first pass trains your brain to tolerate not understanding everything, which is an incredibly important skill, because native listeners themselves don't understand every single word either. They just don't panic about it. They let their brain fill in gaps using context. On your second pass, listen again. But this time, pause every 10 or 15 seconds and try to identify specific words or phrases you recognize, even if you don't catch everything. Write down or say out loud what you did understand. Don't worry yet about the parts you missed. And on your third pass, this is where you can check a transcript if one is available, or look up any specific words you didn't catch, and then listen one final time while reading along, so you can connect the sounds you heard to the actual words on the page. This method mirrors exactly how your brain naturally builds comprehension, moving from general understanding to specific detail. rather than trying to catch everything perfectly on the very first try, which is a recipe for frustration and burnout. The fifth technique is minimal pair training, which focuses specifically on sounds that are easy to confuse with each other. Every language has its own set of sounds, and certain English sounds simply don't exist in many other languages, which makes them genuinely difficult to distinguish at first. Pairs like ship and sheep, or bit and beat, or 30 and dirty, can sound almost identical to an untrained ear, but they mean completely different things, and confusing them can create real misunderstandings. The training method here is simple but powerful. You listen to pairs of similar-sounding words repeatedly, back to back, until your ear starts to notice the difference. And then you practice saying them yourself to reinforce that same distinction in your own speech. Let's try one pair right now. Listen carefully to the difference between these two words. Ship, sheep, ship, sheep. Did you notice how the vowel sound is shorter and more relaxed in ship, and longer and tighter in sheep? Let's try saying both. Repeat. Ship. Repeat. Sheep. Let's try one more pair. Listen to the difference between these two. Live. Leave. Lev. Leave. Notice again how live has that shorter, more relaxed vowel sound, while leave stretches out longer. Try them yourself. Repeat. Live. Repeat. Leave. Okay. Now it's time to actually put everything we've talked about into practice together. Right here, in real time. I'm going to walk you through a short guided listening segment. I'll say a sentence at natural, native speed first, the way you'd actually hear it in a real conversation. Then I'll slow it down and break it apart so you can hear exactly what's happening inside it. And then I'll invite you to repeat it back at natural speed. Ready? Let's begin. Here's our first sentence. At natural speed. Listen closely. What you doing this weekend? Now, let's slow that down and look inside it. That sentence actually started as, what are you doing this weekend? But in fast, natural speech, what are you blended together and reduced all the way down to whatcha. This happens constantly in casual conversation, especially among friends. Let's hear the natural version. One more time. What you doing this weekend? Now it's your turn. Repeat. What you doing this weekend? Let's move to our second sentence. At natural speed. Let me know if you need anything. Let's break that apart. This sentence began as, let me know if you need anything, but let me reduced and blended into lemme, which is extremely common in everyday spoken English, especially in casual, friendly conversation. Let's hear it again at natural speed. Let me know if you need anything. Now, you try. Repeat. Let me know if you need anything. Here's our third sentence. At natural speed. I should have called you earlier. Let's look inside this one. The original sentence is, I should have called you earlier, and should have reduced down to shoulda, with the H sound disappearing completely and the whole phrase compressing into a single quick sound. This pattern, by the way, also applies to could have, which becomes coulda, and would have, which becomes woulda. These are some of the most common reductions you'll hear in spoken English, especially when people are talking about regrets or hypothetical situations. Let's hear the sentence again. I should have called you earlier. Your turn now. Repeat. I should have called you earlier. Let's continue with our fourth sentence. At natural speed. What do you think about that? Breaking it down. This sentence started as, "What do you think about that?" And "What do you?" compressed into, "What do ya?" A pattern you'll hear constantly whenever someone is asking for an opinion in casual conversation. Let's hear it once more. "What do you think about that?" Now repeat it back. Repeat. "What do you think about that?" Here's our fifth sentence, and this one combines a few patterns together. So listen closely. At natural speed. I gotta get out of here. Breaking this apart. Gotta comes from got to, and outa comes from out of. Both classic reductions where unstressed sounds compress and simplify. This sentence is extremely common when someone needs to leave quickly. Maybe they're late for something, or the situation has become uncomfortable. Let's hear it again. I gotta get out of here. Now you try it. Repeat. I gotta get out of here. Let's do our sixth sentence, moving into a slightly longer example now that your ear is warming up. At natural speed. I don't know what she's talking about. Breaking this down. I don't know compresses into I don't know, with the T sound and the vowel both softening and blending together, almost becoming one smooth sound instead of three separate words. This is one of the most frequent reductions in all of spoken English, because I don't know is such a common thing to say. Let's hear it again. I don't know what she's talking about. Your turn. Repeat. I don't know what she's talking about. Here's our seventh sentence. At natural speed. Did you finish your homework yet? Breaking that apart. Did you? Blends together into did ya, with the D and Y sounds merging into that soft J sound we talked about earlier when we discussed assimilation. This question pattern shows up constantly, whether someone's asking about homework, a project, or any task at all. Let's hear it once more. Did you finish your homework yet? Now repeat it. Repeat. Did you finish your homework yet? Let's try our eighth sentence. And this one is a great example of how multiple reductions can stack together in a single, natural sentence. At natural speed. I would have told you if I coulda. Breaking this down, would have becomes woulda. You becomes the reduced ya, and could have becomes coulda. This might feel like a lot happening at once, but remember, native speakers aren't doing anything strange or careless here. This is simply the natural rhythm of relaxed, casual English. Let's hear it again. Slightly slower this time so you can catch each piece. I would have told ya if I coulda. And now, at full natural speed. I would have told you if I coulda. Your turn to try it. Repeat. I would have told you if I coulda. Here's our ninth sentence, and I want you to notice how question words behave in fast speech. At natural speed. Where'd you put my keys? Breaking that apart. Where did you compresses dramatically into something like where'd ya, with several sounds blending and disappearing. This is a great example of how much a phrase can compress when it's said quickly and casually between people who know each other well. Let's hear it again. Where'd ya put my keys? Now you try. Repeat. Where'd ya put my keys? And let's finish our guided practice with the 10th sentence that pulls together several patterns at once, almost like a final exam for your ear. At natural speed. I don't know what you want to do, but we gotta decide soon. Take a breath, and let's break this one apart, piece by piece. I don't know becomes I don't know. What you want to becomes what you wanna. And got to becomes gotta. Three separate reduction patterns, all working together in one natural, flowing sentence. Exactly the way you'd hear it if two friends were trying to make a decision about their evening plans. Let's hear the slow version first, piece by piece. I don't know what you want to do, but we gotta decide soon. And now at full natural speed, all together. I don't know what you want to do, but we gotta decide soon. Now it's your turn. Try saying the whole thing. Repeat. I don't know what you want to do, but we gotta decide soon. Wonderful work. If you followed along and repeated each of those sentences out loud, even quietly, even under your breath, you just gave your brain real, active practice, recognizing and producing some of the most common reduction patterns in spoken English. This is exactly the kind of repeated, focused exposure that builds new listening pathways in your brain over time. Now let's talk about how to turn everything we've covered into a sustainable daily habit. Because here's the truth about ear training and about language learning in general. Consistency matters far more than intensity. Listening to English for 3 hours once a week is nowhere near as effective as listening for 15 or 20 focused minutes every single day. Your brain builds new neural connections gradually, through repeated, spaced exposure, not through occasional marathon sessions. So let me walk you through what a really effective daily listening routine might look like for a B1 learner. In the morning, even before you've fully woken up, try starting with 5 minutes of pure exposure. This could be a short podcast segment, a favorite song with lyrics you enjoy, or even a few minutes of English radio. The goal here isn't deep analysis. It's simply waking your ear up and reminding your brain that English is part of your day, right from the very beginning. Later in the day, ideally somewhere you can sit quietly and focus without distractions. Spend 10 to 15 minutes doing active, focused practice using the techniques we talked about earlier. Maybe you pick a short 1 or 2 minute audio clip and go through the 3-pass method. Listening once for general understanding, once for specific words and phrases, and once more while reading a transcript. Or maybe you choose a short phrase or sentence and practice shadowing it 5 or 6 times in a row, until your rhythm starts to genuinely match the speaker's rhythm. And then, whenever you get a spare moment during your day, maybe while you're commuting, doing dishes, or exercising, that's a great time for passive reinforcement listening. Play something you've already worked with actively, maybe an episode you listened to earlier in the week, or a song whose lyrics you already understand well. This kind of repeated, relaxed listening helps cement patterns your brain already started to recognize during your focused practice sessions, without requiring the same intense concentration. Here's something really important I want to mention about choosing your listening material, especially at the B1 level. Pick content that is only slightly above your current level, not content that's wildly difficult. If you understand less than about half of what you're hearing, you're going to spend most of your energy just feeling frustrated and lost, rather than actually learning anything useful. But if you understand almost everything already, you're not being challenged enough to grow. The sweet spot is usually content where you understand somewhere between 60 and 80% naturally. with the remaining 20 to 40% being just challenging enough to stretch your ear without completely overwhelming it. This is sometimes called comprehensible input, and it's one of the most well-supported ideas in the entire field of language acquisition research. I also want to encourage you to keep a small listening journal, even just a simple note on your phone. After each focused listening session, jot down 1 or 2 specific phrases or reduction patterns you noticed. Things like, "Today I heard gonna and hafta several times in the same conversation," or "I finally understood wouldn't have when the speaker was talking fast." This simple habit of noticing and writing down specific patterns helps turn passive exposure into active, conscious learning. And over time, you'll start to see just how much progress you're actually making, which is incredibly motivating when the day-to-day changes can feel so small and gradual. Now, I want to give you something a little different. A short extended listening passage, almost like a tiny story, so you can practice everything we've learned in a more natural, connected context, rather than just single isolated sentences. I'm going to tell you a short story about a woman named Sarah and her morning, and I'm going to tell it at a natural, comfortable pace, the way you'd actually hear someone tell a story to a friend. Listen first for the general idea. Don't worry about catching every single word. Then I'll go back through it, piece by piece. And finally, we'll do it one more time at full speed so you can notice how much more you catch the second time around. Here's the story. At natural speed. Sarah woke up late again, so she had to rush out of bed and get ready in like 10 minutes. She grabbed her coffee, didn't even have time to drink it properly, and ran outside to catch the bus. But the bus had already left, so she had to call a cab instead, which she really didn't want to do because it's so expensive. When she finally got to work, her boss asked her why she was late, and she just said she'd had a rough morning, which was kinda true, I guess. Okay, let's break that story apart, piece by piece now, so you can hear exactly what happened inside those sentences. The phrase, "she had to rush out of bed," combines 2 reductions. Had to becoming had to, and out of becoming outa. Let's hear that piece slowly. She had to rush out of bed. And now at natural speed. She had to rush out of bed. Try it yourself. Repeat. She had to rush out of bed. Next, we heard she had to call a cab instead, which she really didn't want to do. Here, want to reduces to wanna, a pattern we've already practiced. But notice how naturally it sits inside a longer sentence, blending right in without drawing any special attention to itself. Let's hear it slowly first, which she really didn't want to do. And now naturally, which she really didn't want to do. Your turn. Repeat, which she really didn't want to do. And finally, we heard the phrase, which was kinda true, I guess. Here, kind of reduces down to kinda, another extremely common reduction pattern, especially when someone is being a little uncertain or hesitant about a statement, softening what they're saying. Let's hear it slowly. Which was kind of true, I guess. And now at natural speed, which was kinda true, I guess. Try it. Repeat, which was kinda true, I guess. Now, let's hear the entire story one more time, all the way through, at full natural speed. And notice how much more clearly you can follow it now that we've broken apart each of the tricky pieces. Here it is again. Sarah woke up late again, so she had to rush out of bed and get ready in like 10 minutes. She grabbed her coffee, didn't even have time to drink it properly, and ran outside to catch the bus. But the bus had already left, so she had to call a cab instead, which she really didn't want to do because it's so expensive. When she finally got to work, her boss asked her why she was late, and she just said she'd had a rough morning, which was kinda true, I guess. Notice the difference? This is exactly the kind of transformation that happens in your brain when you go through the 3-pass method we talked about earlier. First, general understanding, then specific detail work, then a final full listen that ties everything together. The same story that might have sounded like a fast, blurry stream of sound the first time now sounds much clearer, much more organized, and much more like individual, recognizable words and phrases. I want to take a few minutes now to talk about something that catches a lot of B1 learners off guard. And that's the huge variety of accents within the English-speaking world. Maybe you've spent months training your ear on American English, feeling more and more confident. And then, suddenly, you're in a conversation with someone from Scotland, or Australia, or Ireland, or South Africa, and it feels like you're starting all over again from zero. This is incredibly common, and I want you to know it's not a sign of failure. It's simply a sign that accents genuinely do change the sound of English quite significantly, sometimes in ways that go far beyond just the reduction patterns we've talked about today. British English, for example, often drops the R sound at the end of words and syllables. So a word like car doesn't sound like car. It sounds more like ka, with the R essentially disappearing. Australian English tends to flatten certain vowel sounds in ways that can make words like today sound closer to die to an untrained ear. Scottish and Irish accents have their own completely distinct rhythms, intonation patterns, and even some unique vocabulary. And within American English alone, there's enormous variation. A Southern accent from Texas sounds quite different from a Boston accent, which sounds quite different again from how people speak in California. Here's my honest advice about this. Don't try to master every single accent all at once. That would be overwhelming and honestly unnecessary. Instead, pick one accent to focus on as your primary training accent, probably whichever one is most relevant to your goals. Maybe it's American English, because you're planning to work with American colleagues, or British English because you're preparing for an exam like IELTS. Get really comfortable and confident with that one accent first. But then, once a month or so, deliberately expose yourself to a different accent, just for variety and flexibility, even if you don't focus intensely on mastering it. This occasional exposure prevents your ear from becoming too narrowly specialized, and it builds a kind of general adaptability that will serve you well no matter who you end up talking to in the real world. Questions deserve their own special attention in this episode, because question intonation and question reductions can be especially tricky for B1 learners. The melody rises and falls in a specific way, and the reductions often happen right at the very beginning of the sentence, which is exactly the part your ear needs to catch quickly in order to even recognize that a question is being asked at all. Let's practice 5 more sentences. All questions this time. Here's our first question. At natural speed. What's up with you today? Breaking this apart. What's up compresses down into what's up, a very casual greeting or check-in that you'll hear constantly among friends, especially younger speakers, though people of all ages use it in relaxed settings. Let's hear it again. What's up with you today? Now you try. Repeat. What's up with you today? Here's our second question. At natural speed. What do you want to do tonight? Let's break this down. What do you compresses into what do ya? And want to compresses into wanna. 2 reductions stacked together in a single quick question. Exactly the kind of thing you'd hear when friends are trying to plan an evening together. Let's hear it again. What do you want to do tonight? Your turn. Repeat. What do you want to do tonight? Here's our third question. At natural speed. Are you going to be okay? Breaking this apart. Are you often blends together so tightly that it almost sounds like a single word? Are you? With barely any separation between the 2 words at all. And going to reduces to gonna, as we've already practiced several times today. Let's hear it again. Are you gonna be okay? Now repeat it. Repeat. Are you gonna be okay? Here's our fourth question. At natural speed. What you been up to lately? Let's break this down. What have you compresses all the way down into whatcha, with the have almost completely disappearing, leaving just a quick, light sound before been. This is an extremely common way to casually ask someone what they've been doing recently. Let's hear it again. What you been up to lately? Your turn to try. Repeat. What you been up to lately? And here's our fifth and final question for this round. At natural speed. Isn't that kinda weird, though? Breaking this apart. Notice how kind of reduces to kinda once again, showing up here inside a question this time rather than a simple statement, which shows just how flexible and common this particular reduction really is across all different types of sentences. Let's hear it again. Isn't that kinda weird, though? Now you try it yourself. Repeat. Isn't that kinda weird, though? Notice something interesting across all 5 of those questions. The reductions we practiced earlier in this episode, gonna, wanna, kinda, whatcha, aren't limited to statements alone. They show up constantly in questions too, because they're simply part of how relaxed natural English works overall. Regardless of sentence type, once your ear locks onto these patterns, you'll start recognizing them everywhere. In statements, in questions, in almost every kind of casual sentence you encounter. Let's squeeze in one more quick round of practice, this time built around everyday situations you're likely to actually encounter. Ordering food, making small talk, and dealing with minor problems, since these are the moments where fast, casual English shows up constantly in real life. Here's our first sentence. At natural speed. Can I get a coffee to go? Please? Breaking this apart. Can I often blends together into something closer to canna, especially in a quick, casual request, like ordering something at a counter. Let's hear it again. Can I get a coffee to go? Please? Now you try. Repeat. Can I get a coffee to go? Please? Here's our second sentence. At natural speed. Sorry. What'd you say? Could you repeat that? Breaking this down. What did you compresses into what'ja? A very natural and common way to ask someone to repeat themselves when you missed something, which, honestly, is a phrase every English learner ends up needing sooner or later. Let's hear it again. Sorry. What'd you say? Could you repeat that? Your turn. Repeat. Sorry. What'd you say? Could you repeat that? Here's our third sentence. At natural speed. Let me guess. You forgot again. Breaking this apart. Let me reduces to lemme, a pattern we've already seen today, appearing here in a light, teasing comment between friends. Let's hear it again. Let me guess. You forgot again. Now repeat it yourself. Repeat. Let me guess. You forgot again. And here's our fourth and final sentence in this round. At natural speed. I guess we'll have to figure it out as we go. Breaking this down. Have to reduces to have to one more time, showing up here in a calm, reassuring kind of statement. The sort of thing someone might say when facing an unexpected problem without too much stress about it. Let's hear it again. I guess we'll have to figure it out as we go. Your turn to finish this round. Repeat. I guess we'll have to figure it out as we go. Notice, across every single round of practice we've done today, how the same handful of reduction patterns keep showing up again and again. Gonna, wanna, hafta, kinda, dunno, lemme, whatcha, and a handful of others. This repetition isn't an accident in how I built this episode. It reflects something genuinely true about spoken English. A fairly small set of reduction patterns accounts for a huge percentage of what you'll actually hear in real, casual conversation. Once your ear truly locks onto these specific patterns, an enormous portion of what used to sound confusing will start to feel remarkably familiar and predictable. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the kinds of resources that work particularly well for this kind of focused ear training, since having the right material makes a real difference in how effective your practice sessions actually are. Podcasts made specifically for English learners, ones with adjustable speed and transcripts, are fantastic for beginning and intermediate ear training, because you can start at a slightly slower pace and gradually work your way up to full natural speed as your confidence grows. Look for episodes that include a transcript. Since being able to read along after listening is incredibly valuable for connecting the sounds you heard to the actual words on the page, especially for words affected by reduction and linking. Short video clips from interviews, talk shows, or even movie trailers work wonderfully for shadowing practice because they're usually only 1 or 2 minutes long, which makes them easy to replay multiple times without feeling overwhelming. Choose clips where you can actually see the speaker's face, since watching mouth movements and facial expressions gives your brain extra visual information that supports your listening comprehension, especially early on. Audiobooks paired with their written text are another wonderful resource, particularly for chunk listening and the 3-pass method. You get to hear a story told at a natural pace, and you can follow along in the text whenever you need extra support, pausing whenever a particular sentence or phrase catches you off guard. And don't underestimate simple, everyday conversation with native speakers or advanced English users, whether that's through a language exchange partner, a tutor, or even joining an English-speaking community online or in person. Real, unscripted conversation includes hesitations, interruptions, background noise, and natural imperfections that scripted audio simply can't replicate. and exposure to that real messiness is ultimately what will prepare you best for real-world listening situations. Whatever resources you choose, remember the golden rule we talked about earlier. Aim for content where you understand somewhere between 60 and 80% naturally. That's the zone where real, efficient learning happens. Not content that's so easy it's boring, and not content that's so difficult it becomes discouraging. Before we wrap up today's episode, I want to talk about a few common mistakes I see B1 learners make when they're trying to improve their listening skills, because avoiding these pitfalls can save you a lot of time and frustration. The first common mistake is relying only on subtitles, especially subtitles in your own native language rather than in English. Now, subtitles aren't evil. They definitely have their place, especially for enjoyment and for understanding overall plot and context. But if you always read subtitles in your native language while watching English content, your brain will naturally take the easy path, letting your eyes do all the work while your ears essentially go on vacation. If you want to build real listening skill, try watching with English subtitles instead of your native language. Or, better yet, try watching short clips with no subtitles at all, then checking a transcript afterward to see what you missed. That gap between what you heard and what you actually missed is exactly where the real learning happens. The second common mistake is avoiding native speed content altogether because it feels too fast and too overwhelming. I understand this instinct completely. Slowed down, audio feels so much more comfortable and manageable. But here's the problem. If you only ever train your ear on slowed-down speech, your ear never actually adapts to real, natural speed. And every time you step into a real conversation, it's going to feel like a shock all over again. Instead, try this approach. Listen to a short clip first at natural speed, even if you only catch fragments and pieces. Then listen to the same clip slowed down, so you can identify what you missed the first time. And then go back and listen one more time at full natural speed. This method trains your ear to work with real speed while still giving you the support you need to fully understand the content. The third common mistake is giving up the moment you feel confused or lost. I know this feeling so well. That moment of panic when you realize you've completely lost the thread of what's being said, and your instinct is to just stop, rewind everything, or give up on the material entirely. But here's an important skill that even native speakers use constantly without even realizing it: tolerating some uncertainty and continuing to listen anyway. Native speakers miss words all the time, too. In their own language. They mishear things. They get distracted. And they simply let their brain fill in the gaps using context, without stopping to obsess over every single missed detail. Practice this same skill deliberately. The next time you feel lost while listening, resist the urge to immediately pause. Instead, keep listening for another 10 or 15 seconds and see if the context around the confusing part helps clarify what you missed. This trains a kind of listening resilience that will serve you incredibly well in real conversations, where you obviously can't pause someone mid-sentence and ask them to repeat themselves every single time. The fourth common mistake is only ever listening to one single type of content, one accent, one speaking style, one topic. If you only ever listen to, say, slow educational podcasts. Your ear becomes excellent at understanding that very specific style. But it might really struggle when faced with a fast-paced movie, or a regional accent, or casual conversation between friends at a coffee shop. Try to vary your listening diet, mixing in different accents like American, British, and Australian English, different formats like podcasts, interviews, movies, and songs, and different speaking speeds and styles. This variety helps your ear become genuinely flexible rather than narrowly specialized in just one particular type of English. I want to give you one more round of guided practice before we wrap up, because repetition really is the secret ingredient in ear training. And the more natural speech patterns your brain gets exposed to today, the stronger those neural pathways become. Let's go through 5 more sentences together, using the same method as before. Natural speed first, then a breakdown, then your turn to repeat. Here's our first sentence in this round. At natural speed. She's gonna have to talk to him eventually. Let's break this apart. Going to reduces to gonna, and have to reduces to hafta. 2 extremely common reductions stacked together in a single sentence, which happens all the time in casual conversation about plans or obligations. Let's hear it again. She's gonna have to talk to him eventually. Now you try. Repeat. She's gonna have to talk to him eventually. Here's our second sentence. At natural speed. You know, I never really thought about it that way. Let's look inside this one. You know compresses down into a quick little filler sound. You know, which native speakers use constantly, almost like a verbal pause. While they're organizing their thoughts or softening a statement, it happens so quickly and so often that many learners don't even realize it's actually 2 full words. Let's hear it again. You know, I never really thought about it that way. Your turn now. Repeat. You know, I never really thought about it that way. Let's move to our third sentence. At natural speed. Why don't you just ask her yourself? Breaking this apart. Why don't you compresses dramatically into why'n'tcha, with several sounds blending together and disappearing. Similar to the pattern we saw earlier, with don't you becoming don'tcha. This kind of suggestion or gentle challenge comes up constantly in everyday conversation between friends and family. Let's hear it again. Why'n't you just ask her yourself? Now repeat it. Repeat. Why'n't you just ask her yourself? Here's our fourth sentence. At natural speed. I have to admit, I kinda liked it. Let's break this down. Have to reduces to hafta, and kind of reduces to kinda. Both patterns we've already practiced today. But notice how naturally they combine together in a single relaxed sentence. The kind of thing a friend might say when admitting they enjoyed something they didn't expect to enjoy. Let's hear it again. I have to admit, I kinda liked it. Your turn to try. Repeat. I have to admit, I kinda liked it. And here's our fifth and final sentence in this round. A slightly longer one to really challenge your ear. At natural speed. I don't know why he's acting like that, but I guess he's got a lot of stuff going on. Let's slow this down and break it into pieces. I don't know becomes I don't know. Acting loses its final G sound and becomes actin, which happens very often with ing endings in casual speech. Got a lot of compresses into got a lotta, and going loses its G sound too, becoming going. Let's hear the slow version first, piece by piece. I don't know why he's acting like that, but I guess he's got a lot of stuff going on. And now, at full natural speed, I don't know why he's acting like that, but I guess he's got a lot of stuff going on. Now it's your turn. Give the whole thing a try. Repeat. I don't know why he's acting like that, but I guess he's got a lot of stuff going on. Excellent work getting through that second round. If some of those sentences felt genuinely challenging, that's completely expected, and it's actually a really good sign. It means your ear is being stretched right at the edge of its current ability, which is exactly where real growth happens. Don't worry if you needed to listen to any of them more than once. That repetition is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Before we move into our final thoughts, I want to answer a few questions that I hear constantly from learners at the B1 level, because I think the answers might be exactly what you need to hear right now. The first question I hear all the time is, how long will it take before I can understand native speakers easily? And I understand why this question matters so much. Everyone wants some kind of timeline, some kind of promise about when the struggle will end. But honestly, the real answer is that it depends heavily on how much focused, active practice you're doing, not just how much time has passed on a calendar. A learner who practices these techniques for 15 focused minutes every single day will likely notice real improvement within just a few weeks, and quite significant improvement within 2 or 3 months. A learner who listens passively once in a while, without any focused technique, might not notice much change even after a year. The quality and consistency of your practice matters far more than the raw number of months or years you've been studying. The second question I hear often is, should I stop watching movies and shows with subtitles completely? And my honest answer is no, not completely. Because enjoyment and motivation matter enormously in language learning. And if removing all subtitles makes watching English content feel like a stressful chore instead of something enjoyable, you're actually more likely to just give up altogether. My suggestion instead is to create a balance. Watch some content purely for fun, with subtitles if that's what makes it enjoyable for you, and then set aside separate, dedicated practice sessions, maybe just 10 or 15 minutes, where you deliberately challenge yourself without subtitles, using the techniques we talked about today. This way, you get both the enjoyment that keeps you motivated and the challenge that actually builds your skill. The third question I hear a lot is it normal to understand a native speaker perfectly one day, and then feel completely lost the very next day with a different speaker? And yes, this is completely normal, and it happens to learners at every single level, not just B1. Different speakers have different accents, different speaking speeds, different voice qualities, and different personal habits of speech. Some people mumble. Some people speak incredibly quickly. Some people have very distinct regional patterns. Your comprehension will naturally vary quite a bit from speaker to speaker. And that variation isn't a sign that you're inconsistent or getting worse. It's simply a natural, expected part of dealing with the huge diversity of real human speech. The fourth question I often hear is, does music count as good listening practice? And my answer here is a little nuanced. Songs can be wonderful for building vocabulary and for pure enjoyment, and even for training rhythm and stress patterns in English. Because music naturally emphasizes certain syllables and beats. However, songs often break normal grammar rules for artistic effect. They might use unusual sentence structures or invented words that don't function like normal conversational reductions. So enjoy music as a supplement to your listening practice. Absolutely. But don't rely on it as your main source for learning connected speech patterns, since it doesn't always represent how people actually speak with each other in everyday conversation. I want to leave you with something very concrete before we finish. A simple 7-day plan you could follow starting tomorrow. Just to give you a clear starting point, rather than a vague idea of practicing more. This isn't the only way to structure your week, but it's a solid, balanced example you can adapt to your own schedule and preferences. On day 1, focus entirely on shadowing. Pick one short audio clip, maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute long, and shadow it out loud at least 5 times in a row, trying to match the rhythm and speed a little more closely with each repetition. On day 2, focus on the 3-pass method with a slightly longer clip, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, moving from general understanding to specific detail, to a final read a long pass with a transcript. On day 3, focus specifically on reduction patterns, the ones we practiced heavily today. Choose a clip and specifically listen for gonna, wanna, hafta, kinda, and dunno. Pausing every time you catch one and saying it back out loud yourself. On day 4, take a lighter day and focus purely on enjoyable passive listening. A podcast episode, a favorite show, or some music, just to keep your ear engaged without the pressure of active analysis. Rest days like this actually matter quite a bit for consolidation, giving your brain time to process everything it absorbed over the previous few days. On day 5, return to active practice, this time focusing on chunk listening, picking out common phrases and chunks from a short conversation or interview, and practicing saying each chunk as a single connected unit, rather than separate words. On day 6, try a completely new accent or speaking style you haven't practiced with yet, just for variety and flexibility, even if it feels a bit more challenging than your usual practice material. And on day 7, do a kind of review session, going back to something you listened to earlier in the week, maybe from day 1 or day 2, and noticing how much clearer and more familiar it feels now compared to when you first heard it. This kind of noticeable, direct comparison is often when learners really start to feel their own progress, rather than just hoping it's happening somewhere in the background. After that first week, you can simply repeat this same rhythm with new material, or adjust it based on which techniques felt most useful and enjoyable for you personally. The structure matters less than the consistency, so feel free to make this plan your own, as long as you're showing up regularly and engaging actively with the material, rather than letting it just play passively in the background. There's one more question I want to answer before we move on, because I think it might be the question sitting quietly behind all the others. Is it possible for an adult learner to truly reach a level where spoken English feels effortless, the way it does for a native speaker? And I want to be honest with you here, rather than just offering empty encouragement. For most adult learners, listening comprehension absolutely can reach a point where it feels smooth, natural, and largely effortless in the vast majority of everyday situations. Understanding friends, colleagues, podcasts, shows, and casual conversation without that constant translating sensation in your head. That level is genuinely achievable, and thousands of learners reach it every single year through consistent, focused practice, exactly like what we've covered today. There might still be occasional moments, an unfamiliar accent, a very fast or mumbled speaker, a noisy environment, where even highly advanced learners and sometimes even native speakers themselves have to ask someone to repeat what they said. But that's not a failure. That's simply part of being human and processing spoken language in general. And it shouldn't be the standard you're measuring yourself against. The real, meaningful goal isn't flawless. Superhuman listening in every possible condition. It's comfortable. Confident understanding in the situations that actually matter in your life. And that goal is well within your reach. As we start to wrap up today's episode, I want to say something important about patience, because I think it's genuinely one of the most overlooked parts of the entire language learning journey. Ear training takes time. It's not something that transforms overnight. And it's definitely not linear, meaning you won't necessarily notice steady, predictable improvement week after week. Some days you'll feel like everything just clicks, and you'll understand things you never thought you could. Other days, even familiar content will feel confusing again, and that's completely normal. It doesn't mean you're going backward. It just means your brain is human. And human brains have good days and harder days. What matters most is consistency over time, not perfection in any single session. If you commit to even just 15 or 20 minutes of focused, active listening practice most days, using the techniques we covered today, shadowing, active prediction, chunk listening, the 3-pass method, and minimal pair training, you will absolutely notice real, measurable improvement, usually within just a few weeks, and quite dramatically within a few months. Your ear genuinely is trainable. This isn't motivational speaking for its own sake. It's simply how auditory processing and neural pathways actually work. Every single time you focus on a sound pattern, notice it, and practice recognizing it, you are literally building and strengthening the exact connections in your brain that will make that pattern instantly familiar the next time you hear it. So here's what I want you to do after this episode ends. Pick just one technique from everything we talked about today. Maybe shadowing, maybe the 3-pass method, whichever one felt the most interesting or useful to you, and commit to trying it with just 5 minutes of English audio sometime today or tomorrow. Don't try to do everything at once. That's a recipe for burnout. Just start small, stay consistent, and trust the process. The same way you'd trust that going to the gym regularly will eventually build real physical strength, even if you can't see much change after just one single session. I also want to gently remind you that comparison is one of the biggest obstacles to progress in language learning, and it shows up constantly around listening skills in particular. It's so easy to compare yourself to someone who's been living in an English-speaking country for years, or to a classmate who seems to understand everything effortlessly, and to feel discouraged by that comparison. But your journey is entirely your own, shaped by your own starting point, your own available time, and your own unique combination of strengths and challenges. The only comparison that actually matters is comparing yourself today to yourself a month ago, or 3 months ago. Are you catching a few more words in fast conversation than you used to? Are you noticing reduction patterns you would have completely missed before? Are you feeling even slightly less exhausted after a conversation in English than you did in the past? Those small, personal shifts are the real evidence of progress, far more meaningful than any comparison to someone else's completely different journey. I'd also like to add one more small piece of encouragement here. Something I've noticed again and again with learners who eventually break through this particular listening plateau. The breakthrough rarely feels dramatic in the moment. It's not usually one single day where everything suddenly clicks into place, like a light switch turning on. Instead, it tends to feel more like a fog slowly lifting, so gradually that you almost don't notice it happening until one day you realize you just understood an entire conversation or a full podcast episode without translating anything in your head at all, without that exhausting mental effort you used to feel. And when that day comes, and it will come if you keep practicing consistently, I hope you'll look back on today's episode as one small, meaningful step along that path. That brings us to the end of today's episode of English in Fluency. I really hope this gave you not just some practical techniques, but also a completely new way of understanding what's actually happening when you listen to spoken English, and why it feels the way it does. Remember, you're not bad at listening. Your ear simply hasn't finished its training yet, and now you have real, concrete tools to help finish that training, one focused session at a time. If today's episode helped you, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it with another English learner who might be struggling with the exact same listening frustrations we talked about today. And if you haven't already, follow English in Fluency wherever you're listening right now, so you never miss a new episode. In our next episode, we're going to dive into speaking fluency and how to reduce those long, awkward pauses when you're searching for words in real-time conversation. So I really hope you'll join me for that one too. Until then, keep listening, keep practicing, and remember, every single minute you spend training your ear is bringing you one step closer to understanding English the way it's actually spoken, in the real world, at real speed, by real people. This has been Jessica, and this is English in Fluency. Talk to you next time.